You know, if you had to pick one game from this entire series to embody what this series means to both schools, there's no better example than the 1988 game between Notre Dame and Michigan.
Grant, you talk about a ticking time bomb. That's what this is. You mentioned there was already a skirmish. The Michigan players were leaving the field. They crossed the path of the Notre Dame players. There was some brushing, some forearms were thrown, there was some pushing and shoving. The coaches had to separate the two teams and send them back into the locker room. The crowd got hostile. The players are short-tempered. This place is ready to explode.
It embodied every characteristic of this series. Two talented teams, two coaches who were legendary, a great deal on the line, animosity by both fan bases and by both teams.
So a big play here for the Michigan Wolverines. Michael Taylor says, I can't call the signal, my players can't hear. Taylor will not step under center John Vitale.
The game was delayed in the second half for an extended period of time because their fans were making too much noise and the Michigan players couldn't hear their quarterback signal.
Now Lou Holtz has gotten into the act. He's down on the sideline and he's asking the crowd to kind of quiet down. They're not going to do it.
When you live in this region, you run into people all the time that are either diehard Michigan fans or diehard Notre Dame fans, and you can flip that. People that don't like Notre Dame and people who don't like Michigan. So the rivalry is everywhere. The emotion is everywhere. To be quite frank, it's more than a healthy dislike. These two teams hate each other.
What makes a good football rivalry? There's got to be a success on both sides. I mean, it can't be lopsided.
When two teams play over a long period of time and the game is always meaningful.
Ready to renew one of college football's greatest rivalries.
Through the years, these games have been so close.
First met in 1887. Michigan and Notre Dame.
You have to have similar type programs, but with different themes behind them. Good and evil. I think that's what makes for a good story.
The games have to mean something, and they really, and there has to be a dislike between the two schools, and there's a dislike between Notre Dame and Michigan, that's for sure.
I think it says something that I've shaken the hands of every opponent I've faced. I've never shaken the hand of a Michigan football player.
Notre Dame and Michigan. It's a hate-hate relationship. We live too close, win too much, and play too tough for it to be any different. It's bad blood. Trust me, I'm from Detroit. I was recruited by Michigan. But you know what? The best high school players in Michigan go to Notre Dame.
Now we're going to play Michigan, and let me tell you something. When you meet somebody that said, I went to the University of Michigan, interpretation, they couldn't get into Notre Dame. Make no mistake about it.
The main thing you have to think about when you're thinking about the Michigan-Notre Dame rivalry is the proximity. We're competing for a lot of the same student athletes. A lot of the players know each other, a lot of the coaches know each other. Fan bases are very familiar with both programs. It's a great rivalry that way.
If you've ever driven between Michigan and Notre Dame, you see that there's nothing but cornfields in the summertime, a few lakes, highways, deer, and there's not much between them. It feels like it is a backyard rivalry as much as any. They are so close. 150 miles is all that separates the campuses.
I really didn't understand the close proximity until that second year when we had to go there. And I remember Coach O was like, you better gas that bus all the way up because I'd be damned if we spend any money in Michigan at the gas station. It was that kind of an atmosphere.
A lot of the alums are family members or friends, neighbors, people who know each other, and people who know what these football Saturdays mean in these towns, in these communities, and to these fan bases.
If you want to go to a great university in the Midwest, if you were Catholic, Notre Dame was the largest Catholic university in America. Michigan occasionally had the honor in the late 1800s and early 1900s of being the largest university from an enrollment standpoint of any in America. That was always part of the core of the two schools' missions, was to be the best at what you do. And so you have those two universities, when they clash, the results are memorable.
For the brand of Michigan football, you got to beat Notre Dame. And the same thing, Notre Dame needs to beat Michigan.
Over a span of over 130 years, Notre Dame and Michigan have met on the football field just over 50 times. But those contests have filled the nation's memory with moments neither school will forget.
It's 42 yards. He hits it, they win. He misses, they lose. The kick is blocked. Good.
Left-footed soccer-style kicker. The ball will be spotted down by Cagle at the 41. This is the ball game. The kick is up. It is gone.
Notre Dame with a miracle win as the clock runs out. Then took the ball right out of his arms. Believe me, the Michigan man had his hands out on the football.
He forces one in there and he makes the catch anyway. Touchdown, Notre Dame.
Waters finds a hole. One man to beat. He's gone.
Ismail up the middle.
May have been knocked unconscious right at the goal line. One of the most spectacular runs you are ever going to see.
These are the two most popular schools in the history of the sport. Nobody's won more games than Michigan. Notre Dame has a history that is unmatched in the sport with great games, championship teams, the place, the venue, what the school has stood for over the years. These are two unique, iconic schools that stand alone in the Midwest in terms of what football means to this part of the world and what it's meant for over a century.
The Notre Dame-Michigan rivalry is smash-mouth, blue-collar, and personal. This rivalry starts at the very beginning. In 1887, the first game the Irish ever played was against Michigan.
Michigan was really the first example of big-time college football way back in the late 1800s, and Michigan's introduction to Notre Dame of how the sport is played and how you build a program was a lot of the reason Notre Dame took off and had success.
Notre Dame basically asked Michigan to teach Notre Dame how to play football, and Michigan did that. Michigan was a power back in 1887 when the two teams played for the first time. And over the next 20 plus years, the two teams played 8 times, and Michigan won all 8 games. It took Notre Dame 9 games to finally beat Michigan, at which point Fielding Yost the next year canceled the series and refused to play Notre Dame for the remainder of his tenure. In fact, Notre Dame did not play Michigan again until the 1940s.
As Notre Dame was focused on growing its football program, Michigan was focused on standing in the way. Michigan had been king of the Midwest and wasn't ready for new competition in the Western Conference.
Michigan-Notre Dame is a unique rivalry in that it is so old and the teams have hardly ever played. In the first 90 years of the rivalry, they played 11 times. And it was what was happening off the field that was the most prominent thread through the whole rivalry.
Notre Dame had frequently reached out to Michigan asking to play, and Michigan always came up with a variety of reasons as to why it would not work out. Not only did Michigan refuse to play Notre Dame, but Yost convinced the rest of the teams in the Western Conference not to play Notre Dame, forcing Notre Dame to go out and play a national schedule.
Notre Dame tried to get into the Big Ten when it was formed in the late 1890s and kept knocking at the door. By the time Rockne became coach in the late 19-teens, 1918, he picked up that ball and was knocking even harder. He was playing Big Ten teams, which angered Yost. He didn't like it that Notre Dame had the advantages of being in the conference without being in it. And finally, in 1926, the Notre Dame hierarchy tried one last time to get into the Big Ten. That was it. From 1926 onward, Notre Dame says, fine, you want us to be the national school away from the Midwest? That's what we'll become, and we'll be great at it, and did.
They wanted to be the big boys in the area, and they didn't want any competition. Notre Dame was held back, it was held out, because I think Michigan knew what this program could become and what it has become, and and I don't think they wanted that competition.
Yost had retired, so Fritz Kreisler was entirely in charge of athletics at Michigan. He didn't like it that in all of the great Catholic prep schools across America, that those kids, if they were any good, would be urged by their priests and by their coaches that, well, you got to go to Notre Dame.
While Michigan wouldn't play Notre Dame most of the century, the battle was off the field in recruiting. Notre Dame was attracting the best athletes in the country from Catholic schools, even those in Ann Arbor. So the feud continues.
Now you got to remember, Rockne and Leahy, to this day, percentage-wise, are the winningest coaches in the history of the sport. So was there athletic jealousy involved in the earlier break-off? Of course there was. Was there again with the second long break-off between 1943 and 78? Of course there was. Athletic jealousy was a huge part and probably the thickest thread through all of it.
You know what? I never knew that. That sounds like something the Michigan Wolverines would do. It really does.
You see what I mean? Like, that's just Michigan for you. They probably couldn't tell you right now why they did that. They just didn't like Notre Dame. And that's why we don't like them. Well, I guess we should say thank you then to Michigan for creating lines in the sand that didn't need to be there, because their efforts now have helped to create the most successful brand in all of college sport.
We're always going to take here at the University of Notre Dame, we're going to take any negative and turn it into a positive. That's just what we do. That's how we operate. We operate at a high level. We compete at a high level. And, you know, good for us. Good for us. Thanks, Michigan. We appreciate it.
Thanks indeed. With no nearby opponents willing to play the Irish and no conference that would welcome this small Midwest Catholic school, the football team boarded a train for New York and altered the course of college football. With the historic upset over Army and the forward pass heard round the world, the small Catholic school captured headlines, radio waves, and the hearts of an America built upon immigrants. They won in Texas. They won in Southern Cal. The Fighting Irish became the nation's team and led many to a loyalty that would transcend generations. If Michigan had not kept Notre Dame out of the conference, no one knows what the landscape of college football would be today. Thank you, Michigan. Indeed. Notre Dame and Michigan, two natural enemies. The school had only played 11 games in 90 years. But these Midwest neighbors had reputations of supremacy that conflicted with one another. By 1978, Notre Dame had 10 consensus national championships, and Michigan claimed the same. The local appetite for a backyard matchup was too strong not to schedule each other, and new generations of university administrators finally agreed. For most of the next 4 decades, Michigan and Notre Dame played almost yearly, and the renewed rivalry satisfied the hype.
And it was great to see the rivalry continue for really generations. There was a little angst between the two universities historically. It was early in the season and a great tone setter for the college football season.
You know, there's so many of these rivalry games that happened late in the season. You know, the Alabama, Auburn, and, you know, Notre Dame plays USC at the end of the year. But Notre Dame, Michigan started the year, and whoever lost that game was out. So it was huge.
There was no playoff system, so it's all about how you look throughout the season and moving up in the rankings because people were going to vote whether or not you were playing in a national championship. So it was a big game. You know, all eyes are watching, every writer, all the people voting are watching this game. So you had to go out and really perform. Performing poorly could really damage you for the rest of the season.
Get past Michigan. There's no team out there that has a combination of toughness and talent. There are a lot of talented teams out there, a lot of tough teams out there, but it's hard to be both.
It's a really big risk playing such a big opponent, but momentum is going to be great for you if you win the game. Conversely, if you lose the game, it's going to hurt your momentum.
You don't have a preseason, and you don't have the opportunity to see what you look like versus other teams. All that training camp, all that preparation, everything you do, it all leads up to that moment where you got to be able to put it together week one.
When Notre Dame aligned itself with the Atlantic Coast Conference in 2014, it maintained football independence, but agreed to schedule 5 ACC teams annually. the non-conference scheduling guidelines of the Big Ten and the ACC became too challenging to maintain the series with Michigan on an annual basis. So the 2014 contest in South Bend would be the last scheduled game for the foreseeable future.
The 2014 game had all the intensity and emotion that any Notre Dame-Michigan game would have.
Stay firm, 1 minute. You are cleared to drop. Key is out. Clear to drop. Clear to drop.
They stand by 13.
10,
9,
13,
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
But this game had something extra because both sides knew this was the last time Notre Dame and Michigan were going to play for not only the foreseeable future, but the belief at the time was that it was going to be a long time before these two teams would get together again on the football field.
This is a great opportunity. You may not see a Michigan game, for a while. I mean, these are the two winningest programs in college football, and that's for a reason. There's an immense amount of pride. Both teams want to win this football game, and they're going to battle and fight to the very end.
You know what to do, you know how to do it. Don't let your brain, don't let your mind get in the way of being a great football player today. Play the game, play it fast, play the way you've been playing since you've been a little kid.
And one last time against Michigan, here come the Irish. Sold out, 80,000 plus. Lucky fans tonight because this one has turned into one of the toughest tickets all season in college football.
I remember seeing them go out and show Michigan how Notre Dame plays football.
Gain of 7, 2nd and 3. And Gardner whips it out, and this time Northleaf will go nowhere. And that is Matthias Farley with a textbook tackle and a loss of 2. So far, the Irish keeping him under wraps. 46-yarder is no good. And on second goal, his number is called, and McDaniel opens the scoring. Puts Notre Dame up 7-0. On 4th and 3. And Golson gets the first down. So now it's 3rd and goal. Golson throwing it to the end zone to Amir Carlisle. Notre Dame has 1:24 left, but as you mentioned, no timeouts. So 3rd and that short. Golson going for the end zone and a leaping grab made by Fuller.
Michigan in our house, not knowing when we were going to play them again, was definitely a sweet feeling.
2nd and 6, and this is Carlisle going in for the score. Gardner's looking punch his way. Now he's scrambling and fumbles the football, and I believe Notre Dame has it.
I remember the sweet taste of victory, and I'm looking forward to getting that again.
And Rinza now setting up for what's going to be about a 42-yard field goal attempt. Well, no problem there. Is this the way it's going to end? First time the Wolverines ever shut out in the history of this series.
I'll never forget stepping onto that field, under the lights and looking up at the scoreboard and seeing 31-0.
The importance of the final score in South Bend was not lost on the Irish. The public rout snapped Michigan's 30-year streak without a shutout. For a series that began with the very first whistle in 1887, the final whistle in 2014 had a nice ring to it. And I like the sound of that. In 2016, Michigan and Notre Dame announced a home-and-home series beginning 2 years later. On September 1st, these two teams will meet in South Bend to start the season and rekindle the hate affair that has colored the history of these two schools. Under the lights, prime time, Notre Dame, Michigan. It's going to be epic.
It's kind of a battle for bragging rights, if you will.
Both these teams feel like they got something to prove this year. And they want to get back on top in college football.
A lot of work has really taken place in shaping and forming this football team.
Since we don't play in a conference, we obviously want to be the best in the country, but we want to take the crown of being the best in the Midwest as well.
It's been 6 months that we've begun working for this day.
We expect to dominate Michigan, and not because they're inferior, but just because we are indeed. We don't play inferior opponents. We want to play the best of the best. Michigan is the best of the best. When they give us their best, our best is just a little bit more.
It's a monumental game against two monumental programs that do not like each other.
This has started since the 1800s. They don't like us, and we don't like them.
We talked about attacking adversity, okay? And what happens when adversity hits, and we attack it, not shying away from it, but embracing who we are as a program, embracing the fact that we have one of the hardest schedules in the country. That's what we're about. That's what we train for.
Everyone knows that, to beat Michigan, it's not easy. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tough fight. It's almost proving that you're the more physical team, which is almost the essence of football.
It's just a big deal. It's Michigan.
This is a game that doesn't happen too often. The rareness of the occasion definitely makes this rivalry special.
Michigan's going to regret teaching us how to play football.